Steam rises inside the palace of Mycenae. Agamemnon stands in the bath, washing off 10 years of war. The bronze doors are closed. The torches burn low. Clytemnestra steps forward. She casts a woven robe without an opening over his head and arms. The conqueror of Troy cannot move. Water turns violent. She strikes 3 times. Not rage, ritual. A sacrifice reversed. When the blood settles, she does not hide. She names it justice for Iphigenia. In the House of Atreus, blood is answered only with blood. Before Clytemnestra ever lifted a blade, the house she married into was already soaked in inherited violence. The curse begins with Tantalus. He kills his own son Pelops, cooks the flesh, and serves it to the gods to test their knowledge. The gods restore the boy, but they do not forgive the father. The punishment is not a single sentence. It is a lineage. Pelops fathers Atreus and Thyestes. The brothers fight for the throne of Mycenae. Atreus wins power, then stages a reconciliation feast. He slaughters the sons of Thyestes, cooks them, and serves them to their father. When the truth is revealed, revenge ceases to be a crime. It becomes obligation. Agamemnon inherits that throne. This is the house Clytemnestra enters. In this family, forgiveness is weakness. Memory is weapon. Justice is private and violent. If a man kills your kin, you must answer. If you do not answer, you lose honor. If you lose honor, you lose power. That is the rule. But Clytemnestra does not come from this curse. She comes from Sparta. She is the daughter of King Tyndareus and Queen Leda. On the night of her conception, myth fractures biology. Zeus approaches Leda in the form of a swan. That same night, Leda lies with her husband. 2 eggs are born. From one hatch, Helen and Pollux, children of Zeus. From the other hatch, Clytemnestra and Castor, children of Tyndareus. Helen carries divine blood. Clytemnestra does not. From the beginning, hierarchy is embedded in birth. One sister will be desired by kings. The other will be married for alliance. Helen becomes the face that launches ships. Clytemnestra becomes the woman history suspects. Even her name carries a record of struggle. Scholars trace the earlier form as Clytemnestra. Klytos, glorious, renowned. Medomai, to plan, to devise. The name suggests she who is famous for her counsel, or more sharply, the renowned strategist. It is an active name. Later transmission shifts it toward Clytemnestra, linking it to Mnaomai, to be courted, to be sought in marriage. The shift is small in sound, but vast in meaning. From architect to object, from mind to marriage. Language adjusts power. What changes is not her actions. What changes is how she is framed. Clytemnestra grows up in Sparta, a city where women are trained physically and expected to manage estates during male absence. She is not secluded. She is educated in discipline, endurance, and public presence. Some traditions suggest she is older than Helen. Some suggest she married before Helen ever left home. Historians debate the details. What remains consistent is her positioning. She stands beside a sister whose beauty bends empires, yet she herself is remembered for calculation rather than allure. 2 sisters, 2 forms of influence. Helen destabilizes the world through desire. Clytemnestra will destabilize it through decision. Both will be called destructive, but the motives diverge. Clytemnestra does not begin as a murderer. She begins as a princess placed at the intersection of 2 systems, the royal house of Sparta and the violent dynasty of Atreus. One system prizes lineage, the other feeds on vengeance. She will belong to both. And when she acts years later inside that bath chamber, she will not be improvising. She will be operating inside a logic older than herself. In the House of Atreus, no act stands alone. Every blade answers another blade. Clytemnestra does not create this rule. She inherits it. Before Aulis, before Troy, before the bath, there was another marriage. According to Euripides, Clytemnestra was first wed to Tantalus, a son of Thyestes. The union was legitimate. She bore him a child. The details are sparse, but the violence that follows is not. Agamemnon arrives. He kills Tantalus. He seizes the infant from Clytemnestra's arms and smashes the child against stone. The act is not battlefield necessity. It is consolidation. A rival branch of the cursed family is removed. A woman becomes collateral. Then comes the second seizure. Agamemnon marries her. Some traditions say Tyndareus consents to avoid war with Mycenae. Some emphasize coercion. What remains constant is imbalance. Clytemnestra does not choose the man who has just murdered her husband and child. She becomes queen of Mycenae. Power changes address. Memory does not. If a king kills your family and you survive, you must adapt or you will be erased. If you adapt, you wait. If you wait, you remember. That is the quieter rule. The marriage produces 4 children: Iphigenia, Electra, Chrysothemis, and Orestes. From the outside, it resembles dynastic stability. He commands armies, she governs the palace. The curse of Atreus appears domesticated, but the foundation is fracture. This matters because Aulis is not the beginning of her rage. It is not the ignition point. It is the second strike. When Agamemnon later decides that wind is worth a daughter, he is not committing his first act of annihilation against her motherhood. He is repeating himself. The palace at Mycenae would have operated with ritual precision. Offerings, councils, military planning, seasonal festivals. Clytemnestra would have presided in his absence, managed estates, supervised servants, maintained alliances, a queen in function even if not in title. Yet beneath protocol lies arithmetic. Husband, murderer of her first child, father of her second, bearer of inherited curse. Marriage in heroic Greece is alliance, not romance. Women are exchanged to stabilize power between houses. Clytemnestra embodies that exchange. She is Spartan royalty, transferred into a volatile dynasty. She does not publicly revolt. She does not flee. She produces heirs. Endurance is not forgiveness. In Euripides' treatment, this early trauma is not incidental. It reframes everything that follows. Clytemnestra is not simply a wife reacting to a single betrayal at Aulis. She is a woman whose reproductive body has already been violated as territory. When Agamemnon kills the infant from her first marriage, he establishes a precedent: children can be sacrificed for political security. Years later, when Calchas demands Iphigenia, Agamemnon recognizes the logic. He has done it before. The difference is scale. First, a private murder inside a domestic coup. Later, a public sacrifice under divine mandate. For Clytemnestra, the pattern is unmistakable. He kills what she births. She learns something essential in that first catastrophe. Survival inside the House of Atreus requires patience. Direct resistance would have meant death. So she occupies her role. She performs queenship. She studies the system that absorbed her. Power in Mycenae flows through male succession. Kings command armies. Women secure lineage. Violence defines legitimacy. If she is to answer violence, she must operate within its grammar. The seed of retaliation is planted long before the ships gather at Aulis. By the time Agamemnon sails for Troy, the marriage is not a partnership. It is a suspended sentence. And Clytemnestra, outwardly contained, has already learned how to wait. The fleet waits at Aulis. Hundreds of ships, thousands of soldiers, bronze, wood, and ambition pressed against a silent sea. No wind moves. Agamemnon has offended Artemis. The offense varies by source: a slain sacred deer, a boast against the goddess, but the consequence is fixed. The winds die, the army cannot sail. Calchas speaks the price. Iphigenia must be sacrificed. A commander faces a calculation. If he preserves his daughter, the expedition collapses. If he preserves the expedition, his daughter dies. Honor before the Greek coalition stands against blood inside his own house. If he refuses, he loses command. If he complies, he loses his child. Agamemnon chooses the war. He does not summon Clytemnestra with truth. He sends a message to Mycenae: bring Iphigenia to Aulis. Achilles will marry her. a union with the greatest warrior of the age, glory sealed through alliance. Clytemnestra prepares her daughter for a wedding. This detail fractures everything. She does not arrive at a battlefield, she arrives at a ceremony. In Euripides' account, the deception is revealed too late. Achilles himself denies knowledge of the plan. The altar stands ready. Soldiers surround the site. Authority closes in from every side. Some versions allow Artemis to substitute a deer at the final moment and spirit Iphigenia away. Others insist the blade falls. What we know for certain is this: Clytemnestra believes her daughter is being murdered by her own father. The scene alters her moral position permanently. Until Aulis, she is a woman injured by private violence. After Aulis, she becomes a mother stripped in public. Agamemnon lifts the knife not as rival, not as usurper, but as priest. Three elements converge: paternal authority, military necessity, and divine command. Against that triangle, Clytemnestra stands alone. If a father can kill his child for wind, then kingship outranks blood. If kingship outranks blood, motherhood has no protection. That is the revelation. Iphigenia is described as the light of her mother's eyes, the eldest, the bridge between generations. Her removal is not abstract loss. It is targeted erasure of the future. When the blade descends, whether literally or symbolically, Clytemnestra's identity shifts. She is no longer merely the wife of Agamemnon. She is the mother of a sacrificed daughter, and she has seen the system justify it. Agamemnon returns to Troy as leader of men. Clytemnestra returns to Mycenae with a wound that cannot be negotiated. From her perspective, this is the second time he has killed her child. The first was political consolidation. The second is divine appeasement. The pattern holds. He sacrifices what she carries. At Aulis, she confronts the limits of persuasion. She argues. She pleads. In some renditions, she clings to Iphigenia physically. None of it alters the outcome. Authority listens, then proceeds. The wind eventually rises. The ships depart. The war begins. Clytemnestra watches the fleet vanish across the horizon, carrying the man who traded his daughter for glory. 10 years follow. 10 years in which the official narrative celebrates heroism abroad. 10 years in which Mycenae continues under her supervision. But inside the palace, memory does not dissipate. It sharpens. Aulis is not an impulsive trauma. It is an ideological rupture. It teaches her that within this order, maternal grief carries no institutional weight. If justice is not provided, it must be enacted. From that moment forward, Agamemnon is not merely an absent husband. He is a condemned man whose sentence has been delayed by distance. And when he finally sails home, he will not be returning to reconciliation. He will be returning to judgment. Agamemnon sails east. Troy absorbs him. Mycenae remains. For 10 years, the king is absent. The throne does not sit empty. Clytemnestra governs. The sources do not describe riots, collapse, or invasion during this period. The palace functions. The city holds. Grain is stored, rituals performed, alliances maintained. Authority does not dissolve in his absence. It transfers. This is where comparison emerges. Penelope waits in Ithaca, weaving delay into fidelity. She preserves her husband's name by resisting remarriage. Her virtue is endurance through inaction. Clytemnestra chooses a different posture. She does not retreat into symbolic loyalty. She occupies space. She speaks in assemblies. She manages the machinery of rule. In Aeschylus, the chorus itself remarks on her man-minded decisiveness. Power unused decays. She uses it. If a ruler is gone for a decade, someone must command. If someone commands successfully, legitimacy begins to shift. This is not seduction. It is administration. During these years, Aegisthus re-enters the political field. He is the son of Thyestes, the brother whose children were slaughtered and served at that infamous banquet. He carries his own inheritance of revenge against the House of Atreus. Agamemnon represents the continuation of Atreus's line. Aegisthus represents the grievance of the other branch. Their interests converge. Clytemnestra's motive is maternal justice. Aegisthus's motive is dynastic retaliation. Together they form alignment. In Aeschylus's telling, she dominates the partnership. Aegisthus speaks loudly only after Agamemnon is dead. Before that, he remains peripheral. The architecture of the plot belongs to her. This matters. She is not manipulated, she recruits. The relationship is public. It is not concealed behind coded gestures. By the time Agamemnon returns, the palace is already politically restructured. A new axis of power has formed. Some traditions attribute children to this union, Alitz Aragon and a daughter named Helen. Whether historical within myth or later embellishment, the symbolic weight is clear. She establishes continuity outside her husband's line. To bear children with Aegisthus while Agamemnon wages war is to deny his exclusive claim over both her body and the succession. Marriage in heroic Greece is property contract. She voids it in practice. If a husband abandons the household for glory, the wife is expected to preserve it intact. If she alters it, she is called faithless. But Clytemnestra does not frame her actions as romance. She frames them as redress. Agamemnon chose war over daughter. She chooses governance over absence. Under her rule, Mycenae does not fracture. This undermines the assumption that male kingship is structurally indispensable. And this is where political anxiety enters the later playwrights. A woman who rules competently threatens more than domestic order. She threatens the conceptual map of authority. In Aeschylus, her rhetoric is sharp, controlled, persuasive. She debates elders. She speaks in calculated language. She does not ramble or plead. She commands. Sophocles will later emphasize cruelty toward Electra to tilt sympathy away from her. Euripides will complicate her interiority. But during these 10 years, the structural fact remains: she holds the state. Meanwhile, the memory of Aulis remains active. Every harvest, every festival, every civic ritual unfolds under the shadow of a daughter who never returned. Governance becomes preparation. Aegisthus provides military and symbolic support. He embodies the counterclaim to Atreus' legacy, but the operational center is Clytemnestra. If you intend to kill a king upon his return, you must control the palace before he arrives. She controls it. By the time Agamemnon sails home from Troy, he is not reclaiming an untouched throne. He is stepping into a regime already recalibrated. The war has lasted 10 years. Her waiting has lasted just as long. But hers is not passive endurance. It is structural consolidation. And when the signal fires announces victory, Clytemnestra is not surprised. She is ready. The beacons flare across the mountains. Troy has fallen. Agamemnon returns not alone, but with Cassandra, princess of the ruined city prophet no one believes, taken as spoil. He enters Mycenae, crowned with victory, and accompanied by proof of conquest. Clytemnestra greets him with ceremony. She orders crimson tapestries laid before the palace doors, purple cloth, costly as blood. She urges him to walk upon them. At first he resists. Such luxury belongs to gods, not men. To tread on it is excess, hubris. She insists. If he refuses, he insults her devotion. If he accepts, he elevates himself beyond mortal measure. He steps forward. The fabric absorbs the weight of a king who believes he has survived every battlefield. Inside, the bath waits. The killing unfolds, as we saw the net, the enclosure, the 3 blows. Cassandra follows him into death. The house is cleansed, Clytemnestra claims, not polluted. She does not flee the scene. She addresses the elders directly. She recounts Iphigenia. She recounts the wound. She names herself Agent of Justice. For a moment, the cycle appears complete. A daughter's blood answered by a husband's. But in the House of Atreus, closure is illusion. Orestes lives. Years later, he returns in secret. Encouraged by Electra, who has preserved hatred as inheritance, he confronts the mother who ruled in his father's absence. If a son does not avenge his father, he betrays patriarchal order. If he kills his mother, he violates primal taboo. That is the trap. Orestes chooses patricide reversed into matricide. He kills Aegisthus. Then he kills Clytemnestra. In some versions, she bares her breast before him, reminding him she nursed him. In others, she argues logic for logic. None of it halts the blade. With her death, the cycle does not end. It escalates into a crisis of justice itself. Aeschylus frames this as political evolution. In the Oresteia, the Furies pursue Orestes for the murder of his mother. Apollo defends him, arguing the father's blood outranks the mother's. Athena establishes a court, the Areopagus, to adjudicate the conflict. The verdict acquits Orestes. Vengeance gives way to civic trial. Clytemnestra becomes necessary casualty in the birth of law. She represents an older system, blood for blood within the household. Her removal clears space for institutional justice. Sophocles narrows the lens. In Electra, the focus shifts to filial rage. Clytemnestra appears hardened, indulgent in power, dismissive of her daughter's grief. The moral frame tilts against her. Her earlier injuries fade behind her present authority. The Euripides fractures certainty. His Clytemnestra carries visible trauma. She remembers her first husband. She remembers Iphigenia. She attempts conversation. When Orestes kills her, the act feels less like triumph and more like contamination. Revenge no longer purifies. It corrodes. 3 playwrights, 3 verdicts. Political threat, domestic tyrant, wounded woman. Interpretation becomes battleground. Centuries later, artists continue the dispute. John Collier paints her in 1882, standing over Agamemnon with a double axe, regal and unflinching. In 1914, he renders her more exposed body, vulnerable weapon altered. Authority and injury share the canvas. Richard Strauss in Electra composes her as haunted by nightmares, rotting from within fear. Christoph Gluck earlier centers her as a mother desperate to save Iphigenia. Martha Graham lets her speak from beyond death, re-examining her choices through modern choreography. Modern novels shift her again. Costanza Casati reimagines her as Spartan survivor, shaped by brutality. Colm Toibin presents her violence as cold logic, rather than madness. Natalie Haynes folds her into the chorus of women scarred by the Trojan War. The figure stabilizes in one sense, she refuses silence. Psychology adds another layer. Carl Jung's Electra complex casts her as the rival mother in the daughter's unconscious. The archetype of the terrible mother frames her as devourer of patriarchal order. Yet contemporary readings reinterpret her rage menace not as monstrous appetite, but as trauma response. If your child is killed by the system that governs you, and that system names it necessary, what options remain? Clytemnestra answers with steel. Her son answers with steel. The playwrights answer with courts, choruses, and reinterpretation. The war shifts from palace to page. And across centuries, the question persists. Was she criminal, or was she consequence? Clytemnestra does not disappear after her death. She moves. From epic to stage, from stage to canvas, from canvas to opera house, from opera house to modern novel. Each era repositions her according to its own anxiety about power, justice, and female authority. In Homer, she is warning, a cautionary tale told to Odysseus in the underworld, the wife who killed her husband. The example against which Penelope shines brighter. Her function is contrast. In 5th century Athens, she becomes argument. Aeschylus places her at the center of the Oresteia. She is intelligent, articulate, politically dangerous. She speaks in long, controlled lines. She governs. She kills. Her presence destabilizes masculine order. Her death enables the foundation of civic court. In this architecture, she is both formidable and expendable. She must fall so that the polis can rise. Sophocles tightens the focus to family fracture. Clytemnestra is filtered through Electra's hatred. The queen becomes mother who failed. The crime against Agamemnon overshadows the crime against Iphigenia. Emotional allegiance shifts toward the children who avenge their father. Euripides unsettles the clarity. he returns to the early violence. He shows her as wounded long before she strikes. In his version, the matricide stains Orestes with visible horror. Justice loses its clean edges. No one exits untouched. The chain continues. In the 19th century, John Collier paints her monumental. In 1882, she stands upright, axe in hand, golden crown glinting. Archaeological detail grounds her in Mycenaean reality. She is not hysterical, she is composed. In 1914, the posture changes. The body is more exposed. The weapon shifts. Authority coexists with vulnerability. The cultural lens has moved. She is no longer only executioner. She is woman marked by injury. Opera amplifies interior collapse. Richard Strauss renders her sleepless, haunted, surrounded by dissonance. Her mind becomes battlefield. Christoph Gluck rewinds the clock to Aulis and frames her as mother resisting sacrifice. The music asks the audience to hear grief before murder. Martha Graham in 1958 allows her to narrate from beyond death. Dance replaces verdict. Movement replaces accusation. She becomes consciousness examining itself. Modern literature intensifies reclamation. Costanza Casati writes her as Spartan forged by violence who refuses erasure. Colm Toybin strips the myth to cold inevitability. Natalie Haynes places her among the women of the Trojan War, whose losses were never counted in victory songs. The transformation is visible. From adulterous wife to strategist. From murderess to mother. From threat to symbol. Legacy is not static memory. It is negotiation. Across these retellings, one tension persists. Did she act from ambition or from injury? Was her violence seizure of power or demand for balance? The moral thesis does not absolve her. It reframes causality. She did not request suffering. She did not request trial. She responded to a system that placed her children beneath military glory. In the House of Atreus, blood demanded blood. Agamemnon accepted that rule when he sacrificed Iphigenia. Clytemnestra accepted it when she killed him. Orestes accepted it when he killed her. Only later does Athens invent the court to interrupt the chain. Her story marks the hinge between private vengeance and public law. And this is why she endures. She stands at the fault line between motherhood and monarchy, between grief and governance. She exposes what happens when justice is monopolized by those who commit the original harm. If the system protects the father who kills for wind, what mechanism protects the mother? She creates her own. History has often preferred to remember her as monster. Monsters simplify discomfort, but the record shows complexity. A woman born into royalty yet denied divinity, married through bloodshed, deprived of children by political calculus, capable of rule, capable of orchestration, capable of lethal response. The question she leaves behind is not whether killing is righteous. It is whether passivity would have been. If you were Clytemnestra standing at Aulis watching the altar prepared, would you accept the death of your daughter as necessary sacrifice? Or would you wait 10 years and dismantle a king